One of the many reasons that I love film as much as I do is, in addition to being able to transport me into a world filled with characters who I might just get the chance to understand and maybe empathize with, film also provides such a unique opportunity for me to get to know the artist behind that world and behind those characters. I, the viewer, get the joy to read between the lines and try to parse through that artist's worldview and maybe even peek at their deepest fears, longings, and desires. And yes, of course, while film can only ever provide me the tip of the iceberg, I do somewhat feel like I have a better understanding of Steven Spielberg after I've watched Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Chris Nolan after I've watched Memento, David Lynch after I've watched Mulholland Drive, and now Dan Gilroy after watching Velvet Buzzsaw. And for me, that was actually the greatest enjoyment I got out of this film. Gilroy clearly had a lot of very strong opinions about the industry in which he works, and seemed to just have a lot of fun parsing through them and expressing them here. And when this film was at its best, I felt like I could sincerely feel him searching. Not in some sort of pretentious way declaring that he'd found the answers or that he'd been able to quantify or categorize every artist's perspective in Hollywood, but rather just that he wanted to try and better understand those around him, and more importantly, understand himself. Because ultimately, he was asking questions that I think anyways, no one should assume they fully understand. Questions like, when it comes to art, what is it all about? What's the point? Can art anymore these days be about anything more than money? And is art only important and alive when it's seen by and affecting others? Or is it purely about the artist expressing something that not even words can articulate? And of course, that Dan Gilroy was able to assemble the ensemble that he did, with each character given a different perspective and opinion on these different questions, certainly didn't hurt his film. Though I did think that he was quite unfortunately underutilized, I particularly liked Jake Gyllenhaal and just his ability to capture this character who was so often and so tragically oblivious to his own hypocritical behavior. And swirling around him with problems all their own were also the brilliant Toni Collette and Rene Russo, who were also just very clearly having a lot of fun in these roles and consequently encouraging me to have fun watching them. Unfortunately, though indeed I did see clearly Dan Gilroy at least attempting to explore the aforementioned ideas, the same kind of authenticity and command was just not found in the overall aesthetic and tone of this film, which was absolutely crucial to its success. When watching a David Lynch film like Mulholland Drive or Blue Velvet, there is this truly indefinable feeling that that director is able to create. This almost magical overtone that his very specific use of the camera, his actors, the music, the light, and the color all work together to produce. And I genuinely feel like in watching films like that, I've stumbled into his dreams, or at least his nightmares. And Dan Gilroy was very clearly trying to create that same kind of feeling and tone with his most recent film, but unfortunately only managed to prove that he's no David Lynch, only an imitator struggling to conjure up a style, tone, and aesthetic that's not truthfully his own. I watched this film in the dark with a really nice pair of headphones on, and it didn't creep me out once, and it tried to a lot, and I'm a guy who's very easily creeped out. Sure, Dan Gilroy was able to capture a few atmospheric establishing shots of LA, a few creepy VFX shots, but the same style just wasn't able to permeate much else, like the film desperately needed it to. Additionally, like I already mentioned, though indeed there were moments of unpretentious and even refreshingly vulnerable exploration done on Gilroy's part, he also quite often fell prey to the opposite, forcing his characters just to become these over-the-top caricatures to prove a certain point. And not only was this annoying, it also robbed me, the viewer, of actually getting to watch real people naturally and realistically progress because of their desires or because of what they feared. Instead, I simply saw a writer moving a number of pawns around his chessboard, simply trying to get his plot from point A to point B. In the end, I didn't hate Velvet Buzzsaw, and certainly thought that Dan Gilroy had a lot of interesting ideas to explore, and a lot of very talented actors to explore and express them with. But in the end, it kind of just ended up being a little bit on the nose, and a little bit cliche, not to mention vanilla, when it so desperately wanted to be oh so sophisticated. And for all these reasons, I will give the film a 2.5 out of 5. I would still love to know what you guys thought of the film though, so definitely comment below and let me know. And right now, what are some of your favorite films on Netflix? I am desperately behind in watching Netflix films and would love some great suggestions. Finally, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.